Here we go, it's Crusader's crossbow time, baby! This might be my favorite weapon in the game, and is one of the main reasons I love this class. Everyone already knows it's fantastic, and most medics already use it if they're taking themselves seriously. However, I found that very few players fully utilize this weapon, as there's a lot more nuance to using it properly than it seems on the surface. So, as someone who has used this thing for an admittedly stupid amount of time, let me break it down for you. Crusader's is a single-shot weapon that fires a bolt at 2400 hammer units per second with some arc to it. The weapon's claim to fame is its ability to both damage enemies and heal teammates on hit, dealing between 38 and 75 damage, or providing between 75 and 150 health. And unlike most weapons in TF2, the crossbow has inverse damage fall off. So the farther away from your target you are, the more damage or healing you will do. It starts scaling at approximately 190 hammer units and reaches its maximum at around 1600 hammer units. This healing cannot overheal teammates. So if you hit your 290 health heavy with a maximum range bolt, you'll still only heal him for the 10 health he's missing. As such, bow is often best used to quickly heal low health teammates, which is a very general statement for now, but we'll discuss its many complexities later. Of course, while its ability to add more healing to a medic's kit is great, it also reloads on stow. In my opinion, it is this aspect of never needing to manually reload that catapults Crusader's power into the stratosphere, creating a massive gap in influence between those who use it properly and everyone else. That's because this is what enables crossbow cycling. You switch back and forth from your Medigun to tank people with arrows as well as beam. Needing to reload would completely undermine this concept, and it's also insanely fun. According to my testing, you can fire a bolt every 1.75 seconds if you are spamming it as much as you possibly can, and the reload on stow does not let you fire off bolts faster, even though it can be used to circumvent the reload animation. So that attack interval will always be 1 3/4 seconds. Let's keep that number in mind. The first invaluable thing that Crusaders provides to a medic's loadout is removing the Medigun's range constraint on healing. Not being locked into only healing the teammates in your immediate vicinity is extremely freeing on this class. You can exert influence without needing to take extra risks by compromising your positioning, healing people from a safe distance, out of sight lines, away from spam, ready to leave if the fight takes a bad turn. It is not an understatement to say that a few good long-range shots can save a player's life or even win games, while maintaining a relatively safe and non-overextended position yourself to live and keep whatever charge you have in case you miss or it just doesn't work out. In fact, here's a clip of me doing just that. The other half of this line of sight healing is your teammates not needing to compromise their own positioning and rotate over to you or back up if they need help. If you have a player getting low while spamming choke or holding a doorway, you can simply toss a bolt over to them without either of you needing to reposition. Little things like these are the unsung heroes of medic decision making, as now it will be harder for the enemies to break through or flank undetected. You're not only helping your team apply more pressure, you're also making it harder for enemies to get to you, increasing survivability. But if you only see Crusaders as a way to heal outside of beam range, you aren't even scratching the surface of what this thing can do. Turns out being able to do a minimum of 75 healing very quickly is kind of a big deal. Let's break this down in a little more detail so we can see how much extra healing you can expect from using bows in addition to beaming allies. This is the art of arrow tanking. It is possible to reattach your meta beam to a patient 1.2 seconds from when you first press your primary button to whip out the crossbow if you fire as quickly as you possibly can. So rather than making the choice to either only beam or only arrow a teammate, the way to truly maximize your healing is to cycle between Medigun and Crusader shots. Fitting this into the 1.75 attack interval for the weapon, for 1.2 of those seconds, you'll either have the bow out or be switching weapons. Then you can get a half second of beaming in before switching back and repeating. In 1.2 seconds, you can only heal 29 health with beam, but a bolt will heal a minimum of 75. Then you get that extra 12 healing from your half second of Medigun. Crunching the numbers, beam alone will heal 42 health in a 1.75 second time frame, while crossbow cycling will heal a minimum of 87, and that's assuming a 75 health bolt. In reality, if you're spacing properly and playing around your max beam range, you can expect arrows that heal for around 90, increasing that number to 102 health in the same time frame. That's 58 health per second, more than doubling the standard 24 HP per second of your Medigun. Now, pulling off this true 1 3/4 second cycle involves doing everything perfectly, including shooting your bow the instant you possibly can, then switching back to bow after only half a second of beam. So as good as these numbers look on paper, they are not realistic to what you can expect in game. I find that taking a few hundred milliseconds or so to line up a shot can increase your accuracy with crossbow tremendously, and I'll usually beam for about up to a second with my Medigun rather than half a second, so I can properly evaluate if I even need to go for another bow. After the first one, my teammate might be fine for now. That puts us at about 1.5 seconds with the crossbow out and around a second of of beaming. 90 health plus 24 from beam over 2.5 seconds puts it at an average 45.6 healing per second, up to 51 depending on how fast you're swapping in that particular moment. That is still about a doubling of your health output. Proper crossbow cycling can easily make the difference in single fights and catapult your healing way above other meds in the lobby over the course of a game. Doing this with the correct timings takes a bit of learning, since you will be wasting some beam time if you switch back too early. I found that waiting for the healing sound of hitting a bolt to die down is a good indicator that you're free to swap again. Don't worry, it won't take long to get into the rhythm of it. Here's the thing though, as great as that extra healing sounds on paper, it's actually better than that. See, Crusaders doesn't just let you heal outside of beam range. It doesn't just increase your overall healing output, it's also burst healing. Another thing that the Mediguns just cannot do. When you crossbow cycle, about 90 of that 114 total health is front loaded and reaches your patient in under the first second. Pipes, rockets, body shots, damage that normally wouldn't be survivable with simply beam healing suddenly is. Fights that aren't winnable become winnable. It's awesome. What is happening to my soldier? The Crusaders is a good weapon, guys. Highly recommend. Another thing of note is that while crossbow can't overheal, it actually can build some Uber. Every 48 health you heal, actually heal, so your teammate needs to be missing this health when you arrow them, will provide you with 1% Uber. This used to be a rate of 1% per 16 health, but with some self-damage shenanigans, meds were able to build invulns in only around 20 seconds. So as of the Jungle Inferno update, the percent starts at that 48 for 1% and scales up to 1% per 16 health in the same manner that crit heals scale healing. So while you don't get any extra healing out of arrowing a teammate with crit heals available, you will get more Uber. This is very interesting because it takes a situation where you shouldn't need to crossbow because of the extra healing provided by crit heals and actually gives you a reason to do it. Here, I built this Uber in only 30 seconds. And this is with 75 health arrows. Healing a full 150 with a bolt on a player with fully ramped up crit heals will net you a solid 9% Uber in just over a second. Admittedly, in casual, you are almost never going to be able to take advantage of this. You'll usually be getting 1 to 2% for close range arrows and 3% for those max range, max health ones. Keep this building in mind because we will need to discuss it later. In actual games, the players that need arrows and the players that have crit heals are in two halves of a Venn diagram that have very little overlap. But still, there is a chance you can turn a small Uber advantage into something greater and catch an opposing medic off guard. The clip playing in the background right now is my 6's team doing just that, turning a small 20% Uber advantage into about 30% and completely catching the enemy team by surprise. But I digress. Simply put, the crossbow provides medic with extra utility that you cannot replace with anything else in the game, and I haven't even brought up its damage yet. Obviously, it's never your job to do damage and get kills on medic, but if the opportunity presents itself, 75 at range isn't half bad. Now, there are only two situations in which you should be spamming bolts at enemies. You either have nothing better to do, no one to heal, buff, or build Uber with, so you might as well take a pot shot or two while you rotate to a position where you can start doing those things instead. Or you know for certain that your arrow will kill them, which is why Crusaders pairs beautifully with the Solemn Vow. If your arrow doesn't finish an enemy, it's most likely a waste, so having that information opens up your pick class abilities a little bit. And don't go too crazy, because there are certainly times where you should not be arrowing enemies even if they're getting kills. But hey, my bow has 13,000 kills on it by now, and a decent number of those are coming from seeing a low health enemy and just letting one loose.
Nah, found them.
I missed on it.
Med dropped.
Come through. Watch this fight.
The Crusader's crossbow is an exceptional weapon. It is the single item in the game that often makes switching off of your Medigun outside of life or death situations worth it on Medic. But now we need to stop glazing so much and discuss the decision-making process of using the weapon to its maximum potential, because in this case, there can definitely be too much of a good thing. And as with most things Medic, the devil is in the details. On the surface, it seems like spamming as many arrows as possible to potentially skyrocket your healing is a surefire way of carrying games, but that isn't the case. There are opportunity costs involved. If you're arrowing, you can't be giving an overheal, and you are giving up at least some Uber build even if you hit the shots. Since we covered that you will almost never be able to make use of the crit heal mechanics without communicating it to a teammate, even hitting an arrow will still delay your 100% by probably about a second. And if you miss, and you will miss some of your arrows, no one is perfect, you just completely wasted 1.5 seconds. No healing, buffs, or percentage at all. So not only does the reward of hitting your bolt need to outweigh the cost of going for it, you also need to factor in the risk of missing entirely. There are countless scenarios where attempting to bow a player is the incorrect option, even if you hit it, and you need to be able to recognize that. Let's talk about them, starting with the easy ones. If you are currently out of beam range of any teammate and are repositioning, or have decided to back out of a situation because it is starting to look a little too dangerous, then of course, you might as well go for an arrow. You can't beam, so you aren't giving up on basically anything, and hitting the bolt might be able to salvage something. I found one of the best ways to live as a medic if you're getting overwhelmed is to arrow tank a teammate as you retreat. So by the time the enemies finish him off, you're in a safer position already. If you do have teammates around you, you have to weigh going for that arrow against beaming up or buffing the teammates that are next to you right now. But again, this choice is pretty easy if you're doing what I often do, which is using my bows to tank the players on the front lines when I feel it's too dangerous for me to be there beaming them as well. Maybe we're down a few key classes, or I know they'll be getting a Kritzkrieg charge soon that I'd rather not die to. The players actually doing the fighting here take priority over everyone else, as they are going to be able to potentially do the most with that burst healing. For example, right here, when my heavy jumps down to the cart, it makes way more sense for me to maintain my strong position on high ground defended by sentries and shoot some bows at him than jump down and join him. Unfortunately, most of the time, the decision-making process isn't that easy. So here's my philosophy on when you should go for it and when you shouldn't. In an isolated fight, if your teammate can only win by receiving a bow, or you are bowing them to stall for time as you retreat to a safer position, then you might as well go for the clutch. If they are surely dead anyway, you're better off healing anyone else. See, the tricky part is making that distinction between players that are fine with just beam healing, players that need the bow, and players that are dead no matter what you do. It takes a lot of intuition and experience to get this right the majority of the time. Your first clue to figuring this out is looking at what class or classes your teammate is fighting. Against high burst enemies like soldiers, demos, and snipers, health thresholds are extremely important. So arrowing a teammate right before or after that pipe or rocket connects could be the difference maker. As such, I tend to favor going for the clutch in these situations. Against more DPS focused classes like heavy, I can wait until my patient is around 40 or 50 health and only then go for it, relying on the easy and guaranteed healing from beam in the meantime. It also depends on what class your patient is. Slower classes like heavy, demo, and soldier are really easy to hit, and they have higher health pools to take advantage of that instant injection of HP. Special shout out to heavy in particular here. Arrow tanking a heavy is stupidly easy and can often double or triple his total health throughout a drawn out fight if the enemies aren't smart enough to focus him down. Many objectives have been won or defended just by pumping the sky full of needles. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Scout will be much harder to hit in a fight since his attempts at evading the enemy's shots will inadvertently lead him to evading your arrows as well, at least if you're not locked in. And because of his ability to dodge so much damage, a steady and guaranteed 24 health per second from beam is way more valuable on Scout than the likes of soldier or heavy. Paying attention to these small things and making an informed decision about switching before firing any arrow rather than just spamming will start to up your Crusader's game substantially. Now this won't happen overnight, but as you're playing, if a teammate dies in front of you and you have a moment, ask yourself, could you or should you have tried to save them with a clutch bolt? And the reverse is also great to ponder. After using a bow, ask yourself if your teammate really needed it or not. Here's a hint. If you missed and they're still alive anyway, you didn't need to go for it in the first place. Doing this over time will hone your skills in this regard. But I'm not even done explaining this weapon's various use cases. It's not just that ranged healing or getting clutch bolts or arrow tanking your heavies that you should be utilizing this weapon for. We need to talk about tempo. Tempo, broadly speaking, is the rhythm, the pace at which a team controls movement around the map, pressure on the opposing team, and the engagements that are happening. One way to think about this is that the team with higher tempo is playing faster. They are calling the shots, and the other team is forced to play more reactively and slow down their own tempo until such a time that everything evens out. If the team with more tempo is able to maintain it or even increase it and gain momentum, that's how a roll happens. For a quick example, using an Ubercharge is an instant tempo advantage for your team that often forces a counterpop or a repositioning by the enemies not to be caught out and die to it. And things like sentries or sticky traps are great at neutralizing a bit of offensive tempo when set up correctly. The overall flow of any game revolves around which teams have more tempo and what they are doing with it. Why am I bringing this up in a Crusader's crossbow guide? Well, I'm a big believer in what I call tempo arrows in casual, and I attribute a lot of my ability to differentiate myself from other medics to this skill alone. Tempo arrows are not arrows that exclusively heal teammates outside of beam range or are focused on tanking a player actively fighting. They are arrows aimed at getting teammates that were forced out of the fight due to low health back in the fight as quickly as possible. These are the arrows where you are turning around to hit the players that aren't currently on the front lines so they can get right back to it with little delay. They aren't glamorous clutch air shots, but they allow you to increase your overall healing output, putting players back to pressuring and potentially overwhelming enemies by sheer brute health. The best part is these arrows are often much easier to hit since your teammates aren't actively fighting and strafing around. They'll usually be walking in a straight line, maybe towards a health pack, away from the action, or better yet, standing still waiting for you to arrow them. So even factoring in the few you'll miss doing this over just beaming, your healing will completely explode. And that's not even mentioning how the burst from crossbow will help you get more players to 100% health very quickly, so you can start distributing overheal way faster than if you simply beamed. And you know I love my buffs. You'll often see me employ this strategy immediately post Uber, getting as many players back to full as quickly as possible so that we can keep our tempo lead that the pop hopefully gave us. It's also great at keeping up the pressure in a choke since you can quite easily out-heal the opposing medic by a significant margin over time. The caveat to this is that you now have to be very aware of the health values and positions of not only your players fighting on the front lines, but also everyone else on your team. You want these tempo arrows to be a quick turn bolt, then back to taking the players on the front line. And juggling both simultaneously adds yet another layer to this decision-making process. Since turning around to arrow your soldier who's completely safe while getting him back in the fight does leave your front line exposed and potentially baited if they were the ones just being tanked. There are absolutely times when low health players can get a pack or simply wait because you have much better things to be doing. Pay attention to this because if your front line is dying or being forced back, you're going for too many of these tempo arrows and need to instead focus more on your players currently in a fight. Once again, finding the correct timing on these takes a lot of intuition and game sense, and it's something you're gonna have to work on. Greatest Ubercharge user. He thinks he's going for a clip. He's in my clip. All right, we've gone over the opportunity costs and decision-making process that goes into switching to crossbow over your Medigun. So now it's time to bring up the weapon's true downside, tunnel vision. With how important awareness of teammates and enemies is to staying alive as a medic, a lot can go wrong while you're exerting the mental energy of deciding when to use the crossbow, then taking aim and firing. By very nature, when thinking about bows, you are taking away some thought from Uber tracking, spy tracking, positioning, and other aspects that keep you alive. Additionally, the act of moving your crosshair to aim at a teammate likely lowers the amount of information you can take in about the game. Because Mediguns heal whether you're looking at your patient or not, having good crosshair placement while healing can let you see flankers, soldier bombs, and avoid spam much more easily. That all goes out the window as soon as you're forced to have your teammates front and center as you aim and shoot. Not to mention, you also won't be able to turn around and spy check as often if you're constantly spamming arrows into your front lines. This is why I think good positioning goes hand in hand with using the crossbow effectively, and you always still need to value your life more than saving teammates with clutch bolts. I don't care if you're hitting the nastiest shots imaginable if you can't get an Ubercharge. Being in a proper location can help mitigate these dangers more proactively. If you have an escape planned and you already know the flanks are covered, then you can sit there and commit to some arrow tanking. Even still, there are times where you just need to play your life and focus on other things. Here, the entire enemy team was sacrificing themselves for me, so rather than ever even attempting a bunch of bows on my multiple low health teammates, I kept beam on my scout shots for move speed and double health regen, focusing entirely on movement and dodging shots to stay alive. If you are in a bad position and are also compromising your awareness by going for too many bows, that's a recipe for swiftly putting yourself in the respawn queue. So that's my top-down decision-making process on Crusaders. And if you want to improve at it, seriously take my recommendation of evaluating your bow timings and impact in your own games. Intentional practice like that really does make a huge difference. Now, I want you to wrap all of those ideas together into a neat little bundle, the clutches, arrow tanking, and tempo bows, and think about how it interacts with your Ubercharge. Because once again, inherently, the more you arrow, the slower you build. The slower you build, the higher the risk of something going wrong and you dying before reaching 100%. Opportunity costs, people. I often follow a simple rule of thumb in my arrowing and positioning. Once I get to about 60 to 70%, I'm going to prioritize getting that charge over just about anything else, including arrows. I'll still go for the easy ones, but I won't waste my time spamming a bunch down a choke point. Additionally, I recommend reading into the game state a bit. If you're trying to push into a barn blitz last with 3 NGs fully set up, first of all, good luck. And second of all, no amount of arrows in the world is going to break through and win that game. It's going to have to be your Uber. So you might want to slow down on the arrow tanking a bit. And honestly, let some players die so you can build faster and get more charges off overall. Hopefully now you see why I dislike the notion I've seen around the community that the crossbow is a brain-dead weapon, because it both heals allies and damages enemies, allowing you to just spam it and gain value. There is so much more nuance to this thing than it seems on the surface, and using it well in conjunction with everything else you'll be doing on Medic is a challenging but worthwhile skill. There seems to be this misconception that for the crossbow, the only thing matters is how good your aim is, but that's not even close. Timing your bows properly is equally as crucial as hitting them. I've seen it recommended for medics to practice Crusaders by just using it exclusively in a few games, but I personally do not recommend doing that. If you want to practice pure aim, you can go to a map like TR Medic Expo, but using the tips previously stated about critiquing your decision making is also a necessary step. Sure, a medic sitting there and spamming 50 damage bolts into an enemy heavy being tanked is certainly doing something, just not the best thing, or having nearly the impact on the game they could be having. There are a few more things I'd like to bring up with regard to this weapon. The first one being crit heals once again. I've emphasized their importance many times and how they can also substantially increase healing output. So I'm sure some of you are wondering if by utilizing crit heals well, the crossbow becomes less effective or even redundant in some way. The simple answer to that is no. Crit heals and crossbows solve two different problems for the medic, so one does not make the other any less valuable. Crit heals let you heal up players who haven't been fighting extremely fast. The Crusaders lets you heal up players who have been fighting extremely fast as well. Mastering the timings of both is how you maximize your healing and keep the most players alive and healthy as possible. A strange quirk of the weapon is that if you run out of arrows and are forced to swap weapons because of that, when you eventually get ammo and swap back to the crossbow, you will need to manually reload unless you very quickly swap to and from it twice in a row. I'll also let you know that hitting a disguised spy with an arrow will make a hit sound rather than the healing sound of hitting a real teammate. If you're approaching a player you're unsure about, it can be a great way to spy check them before accidentally attaching beam and buffing an enemy spy. Use auto call in addition to this for some easy spy checks. Let's also talk about your choice of Medigun. To be clear, Crusader's crossbow has zero competition and is best in slot on every Medigun. It's not even close, but there are still a few things to be aware of. Due to the Uber build of crossbow being a flat amount based on health healed, it will not change even if you're using a Medigun that builds faster than stock, such as crits or vaccinator. So the 1 to 2% Uber gain from hitting an arrow means you're only giving up a couple extra percent on stock, but could be giving up 3, 4, or even 5% Uber in the case of crits or vac. I tend to keep this in mind on Kritzkrieg, especially in situations where I value building quickly and surprising the enemies with a pop to be more important than the extra health given from bows. So I'll only swap when truly needed and don't focus nearly as much on tempo arrows with this Medigun. Vaccinator is a slightly different story because while it does have the fastest building in the game, you should be using arrows very often with this Medigun. I won't go into too much detail here because I already did that when talking about the weapon in VAC 101. The gist of it is your patient doesn't lose their bubble when you swap weapons, so you can give them the benefit of 75% damage reduction and burst healing at the same time, making them nigh unkillable to single enemies. Okay, here's the deal with the quick fix, because I know I'm going to get some comments on this. I've seen it echoed that because this weapon has an increased heal rate, you aren't as beholden to the crossbow meta as you are with the other Mediguns. I want to address this because it is true, but in the most insignificant way possible. If we go back to our healing numbers from the beginning, I stated that Crossbow Cycling can realistically take your average healing from the standard 24 health per second to between about 45 to 50. Not only is that still noticeably higher than the quick fix's base rate of 33.6. So you'd still be getting outclassed by any medic with a bow, but using the crossbow with quick fix only ups this value to about 50 to 54 health per second, meaning the 40% increased heal rate of quick fix beam is reduced to about a 10 to 15% advantage for 2 medics that are crossbow cycling, one with quick fix and one without. Outside of situations where you're cycling, you can heal more with this Medigun, but the more bows you go for, the less you're using the quick fix's main upside of increased beam healing while still dealing with all of its downsides. And with quick fix, you also somewhat diminish the extra tempo the burst healing gives in allowing you to start buffing players sooner since your buffs are weaker by default. Moreover, electing not to use Crusaders on quick fix still causes you to run into all of the limitations it solves for medic, such as healing people out of beam range or being able to clutch a burst heal on someone in a fight. Crossbow just offers so much you can't get anywhere else, and since it alone can help meds come very close to matching or even exceeding in some instances the quick fix's increased heal rate, it actually makes the quick fix itself somewhat redundant, while the reverse is far from true. Quick fix in no way makes using the crossbow unnecessary if you want to maximize your impact. Furthermore, I want to finish this guide by discussing the skill aspect of the weapon. I have seen a few comments in my medic career about not using Crusaders because it requires aim to do so, and some players aren't confident in their aim. If you don't care about the meta or want to use something else because it feels stale, more power to you. I'll whip out the overdose every once in a while, no shame. However, caring about performing on med and still not using it is a very defeatist attitude you will need to overcome to truly improve. If you're worried you'll miss a key bow in a tense situation and your teammate will die because of it, let me tell you a little secret. If you don't go for it and it truly is a situation that they need that burst of health, they're going to die anyways. Imagine a sniper main with the same outlook. I didn't take the shot because I might miss it. Absurd. Of course, sniper doesn't come with the same opportunity costs as a medic does when taking a shot. That's why so much of this guide was on that decision-making process. You need to be sure going for the shot was worth it. But if you do miss, so what? Suck it up and tell yourself you'll hit it next time. I hate seeing this "I don't use crossbow because my aim is bad" mentality. Newsflash, your aim is bad because you don't use the crossbow and thus never practice it. Aiming is built up over time. There are no shortcuts. I still do have a few tips though. Aim for the middle of your target so you're hitting them whether they decide to jump or crouch. You can also consider the enemy your teammate is fighting and their current position to predict their movement better. Are they winning and pushing forward, or are they desperately trying to stay alive at 1 HP? Are they fighting an explosive class where they can be popped up into the air, or a heavy where they can be pushed back? Taking these into account can inform you about where they are most likely to move next. Additionally, I like to wait a moment if time allows for them to change directions. Most players don't immediately stop or strafe again after doing so. Quickly reacting and flicking in the direction they just chose has given me the most success on landing my shots. Ultimately, it is practice that will improve your aim. Just remember that Crusaders is more than just aiming, and ensure you aren't giving up too much to hit those nutty bolts. Although it does feel great to earn that praise.
One last
all
bullet.
right.
I think
Them took 200, bro. Nice
I'm
fucking
getting
arrow,
through
dude.
main.
I'm dead. Just run.
Holy shit, nice fucking bows. You're so
Demo
good.
Nice. Run. Keep running.
Nice.
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 Play set though. Very appeal.
Yeah, bunker.
Sort of right. Sort of far right.
Left,
Sort
yes,
of right.
left.
I'm main. So
We're
they're
in
going.
Guy.
He's Aaron.
Nice.
He's rolled.
I'll throw this
I'm helping you top left.
That's 80 there.
Good.
Nice.
Nice.
Last two.